Siti Nandamia binti Isa, and my student ID is 2021109535.
Hi, my name is Siti Zulaika binti Mak Rahim. My matric number is 2021-123-683.
Hi and Assalamualaikum. My name is Lily Shada binti Rosli and my student ID is 2021108361.
Hi and Assalamualaikum. My name is Sharifah Sharimin binti Said Muhammad Nazari and my student number is 2021105677.
Privatization occurs when a government-owned business, operation or property becomes owned by a private or non-government party. Note that privatization also describes the transition of a company from being publicly traded to becoming privately held. This is referred to as a corporate privatization. Privatization describes the process by which a piece of property or business goes from being owned by the government to being privately owned. It generally helps governments save money and increase efficiency, where private companies can move goods quicker and more efficiently. The privatization policies was launched in 1983 to support the Malaysia incorporate policy towards increasing the private sector roles in the country's economic development. The Malaysian government has formulated and implemented several policies to address a specific problem or issue. It has been shown that since the 1980s, Malaysia has achieved a remarkable growth and development. The Malaysian government has already amended a number of laws which could have posed serious unintended obstacles to the privatization program. For instance, the Pension Act 1980, the Telecommunication Act 1950, the Port Authorities Act 1963, and the Electricity Act 1949 have already been amended to facilitate smooth implementation of a privatization program. Moreover, through the regulation, the government mainly intends to allow maximum practical to degree of a competition in privatized industries, so the free play of market force would dictate economic decision making in such industries.
The Malaysian government has launched this privatization policy based on objectives designed to safeguard the interests and assist the government in matter of national development. One of the objectives is to reduce the financial and administration burden of the government to hand over commission activity to the private sector, so that the government can focus its efforts on maintaining national security and providing support to the achievement of organization objectives. In addition, the government also had to maintain certain service and investment. The second one is to increase efficiency level and increase productivity. In change through a number of means, including creating and encouraging competition to provide incentive to employ by privatization, curtain government service, as well as with better expense and alternative to the private sector. The profit-oriented private sector can increase intense competition and can increase productivity. The third is to promote economic organization and national effectiveness. It can also open opportunity for the private sector to increase its role in the development of the country, as well as more private companies that can be created indirectly can improve the country economic organization more rapidly. The government can also ease the financial burden and at the same time increase national income. Privatization will also open up more employment opportunities for the people. And then, privatization policy can reduce the size and involvement of the public sector in the economy. It can reduce and downsize the public sector, as well as highlight the greater involvement of the private sector in economic growth to lead the country. In addition, government involvement in the economic sector causes most of the country resources to be under their rule. This privatization will help the government by allocating these resources to the private sector when they are more expert. Lastly, is to help achieve new economic policy goal. It also set up a new economic planning unit. The committee has prepared comprehensive guidelines for the use of ministry or department wishing to private some of their service under their control. With this, the government can create more Bumiputra private company participation or the number of Bumiputra managers to meet the requirement of the new economic policy. With the participation of the private sector, Bumiputra participation in business or trade will increase. Therefore, the NEP goals of creating Bumiputra business and reducing the economic gap will be achieved.
Privatisation in Malaysia refers to agencies and companies owned by the Malaysian government that have been privatized by the Malaysian government. This policy was introduced to increase the efficiency of less viable agencies and companies. Some government agencies are very attractive and profitable. The government does not need to borrow from external sources to increase financial resources because local investors themselves can invest in privatized companies. Usually, these agencies provide major utilities such as transportation, water supply, electricity, telecommunication, and others. The Malaysian government is taking the examples of Western countries, especially Britain, which has been practicing the policy for a long time. Competition will increase the efficiency, and the government will not be blamed if weaknesses occur. The Prime Minister of Malaysia at the time, Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, believed more in smart partnership between the government and the private sector. These multinational or giants will better treat smaller companies. In the meantime, job opportunities will also increase, dynamic and mobile. Employees who do not agree with the policy can apply to remain with the government but be transferred to a new place. They can also choose to quit and get high compensation. So far, government has not been able to lay off incompetent workers. With this privatization policy, workers automatically become more industrious due to high salary payments. They can work overtime and other work outside of service. The CEO and staff will be more accountable because the company belongs to them. They have a share in it. During the privatization process, a number of shares were given to the CEO and all staff for free or special shares. Privatization policies and programs have played an important role in accelerating economic growth through greater investment and leading to the expansion of the corporate sector. Although the objective of privatization is not to generate revenue, these programs have contributed a substantial revenue to the government from the sale of assets and equity. This policy has to benefit the low-income groups. This comprehensive involvement has been achieved through public offerings to the public as well as international investors such as state trusts. Bumiputra also increased through the privatization program of government entities through MBOs. Through this method, the number of Bumiputra entrepreneurs involved also increased in line with the creation of the Bumiputra Commercial and Industrial Society.
I would like to share about implementation of the policy. Privatization policy is designed to meet the socio-economic objective of any country. Policy decisions are the effect of actions taken. Once the policy decision has been obtained, then a policy evaluation will be done to see to what extent the strategy we are doing can achieve the policy objective or can overcome the problem to be solved. Among the strategies implemented by the privatization policy is the Privatization Master Plan. The Privatization Master Plans aim to enable the private and public sector to clearly understand the policy under the privatization program. The Privatization Master Plans contain guidelines and explain on policy implementation, conceptual framework, overall framework, and privatization-related issues. Privatization policy has also enhanced the ability of Malaysians to acquire new technology either through management contract, consultancy service, or new investment, particularly in telecommunications, transport, and public utilities. Bumiputra involvement in the economy can be also be strengthened through privatization, as can be seen from their participation through equality ownership as well as management. Privatization has also benefited all Malaysians, including the low-income group. In addition, the privatization program has reduced the burden of government administration in terms of requirement, promotion, and training of tasks. The privatization program has been able to save government spending either through capital expenditure, property sale and equity, or corporate tax revenue, which not only allow the government to reduce borrowing but also allow for the addition of existing resources to finance other sector development projects such as education and health. Lastly, its privatization policy has also facilitated technology transfer by encouraging research and development effort by large privatization companies. Research and development is the first stage in the development of a potential new service or production service. R&D activity differs from institution with two main models of R&D department, either operate by engineer and task to further develop new product, or operated with engineer and task for applied research in scientific or technological field, which may facilitate future product development.
Privatization has played an important role in accelerating economic growth through greater investment, which led to the expansion of the corporate sector. Growth is also happening through increased efficiency as more output can be produced through the use of smaller resources. In addition, the financial burden of the government has been significantly reduced and increased national income as a result of the successful privatizations of several entities. Recurring income in the form of lease rentals through privatizations projects, as well as contributing to government revenue. Savings and proceeds from sale assets and equity, as well as corporate taxes, enable the government to reduce borrowing. Privatization policy also provides efficiency and productivity through providing better services and management systems. Overall achievement, privatized entities have improved as a result of increased capacity and services network, in addition to the procurement and use of equipment and modern technology. The general public's concerns. Many businesses such as healthcare, schooling, and public transportation provide essential public services. The profit motive need not be the prime goal of companies or the business in these sectors. In the case of health insurance, for example, it is feared that privatizing healthcare will place a stronger emphasis on benefit over patient care, demonstrating their potential to operate in third countries of pursuing ways to expand investment through the construction of facilities specific to their core area of operations, such as the provisions of office space that can be combined with mass transit rail systems are only a few examples. The government being influenced by short-term pressures to appease shareholders, they may aim to boost short-term profits while avoiding long-term investments. For example, there is a lack of interest in alternative energy sources. Instead of investing in new facilities, privatized businesses try to make do with what they have. Cost-cutting and high-quality manufacturing are not priorities of the private sector. There are many unethical activities that many companies engage in, which often result in the production of black money and corruption. There is a sprinkling of true entrepreneurship that is willing to experiment with innovative products and methods. The introductions and implementation of privatization policy has provided opportunities to promote national effectiveness and economic growth of the country, as well as state resources that have not been fully utilized. With this, it can increase productivity in the country and can ensure that the country's capital can be used efficiently and completely. If many private businesses are established in the country, it can help increase the country's economic growth directly and indirectly. For example, in the field of manufacturing, this can improve the country's economy by the way the government imposes income tax on private businesses. Socially, the private sector imposes high costs on consumers. This goes against the original policy of reducing consumers' costs. This is because the main goal of the private sector is to maximize the profits of their organizations. For example, private hospitals in providing treatment to patients. Private monopolies have emerged after the privatization policy was introduced. This is because the private sector is not owned by the state to manage. This is because the private sectors having the power to control some important areas. For example, water companies in each state and rail services. Thus, monopolistic power among the private sectors occurs because the areas monopolies by the private sectors are not fully owned by the government. Malaysia's privatizations of the public sectors may have been more effective if it had prepared for regulatory frameworks and simple, open administrative procedures that prioritize transparency and good governance. Reforming the public sector is an ongoing task that necessitates effective political and public leaderships, as well as a joint commitment to better governance. The lack of accountability in the concessions company selection process has led to accusations of cronyism being leveled against the government, leading to the assumptions that concessions companies are avoided on the grounds of political loyalty rather than the good of society. Because of the lack of accountability and limited participation in the process, the scheme has received little public attention, resulting in public demonstrations and governments cutting or heavy proposed increases. The government grants privatization organizers rights in exchange for encouraging investment. The introductions of privatization seems to have favored cover rights interests. As a result, the government must control the private sector's activity to ensure that misconduct doesn't exist within the company.
In conclusion, when a new privatization policy is created, the risks to be faced are the pros and cons that the state will accept. Based on the task given, this privatization policy clearly shows that privatization policy contributes more advantage than disadvantage than the people. Furthermore, this privatization policy needs to be continued in the future so that the country can grow in line with the government's intention to make Malaysia a developed country on par with other developed countries. This policy also needs to be controlled from time to time so that it does not burden consumers as a result of the private sector making profit as the main goal. Consequently, the privatization policy made the country give a good impact to all agencies. Besides that, concerns over the privatization policy arose as there would be a number of transfer of national monopoly ownership that should have been handled by the public sector to private companies. It is feared that the transfer could lead to an increase in costs, risk, and inequal income distribution due to the monopolization. However, if this policy is studied in depth and practiced properly after taking into account the possible abuse of monopoly power above, it will be able to provide a more efficient, fast and cheap service to its users, which will indirectly accelerate economic growth and development country. Lastly, our group is very proud to be able to complete the assigned tasks as well as possible and to be able to add new things about privatization policy, especially about it is implemented in this country.